Welcome everyone. Happy holidays. I hope you all can hear me well. It has been quite a year so far. But I think before we start this conversation, it would be nice just to center ourselves. And how we'll do that is we're going to center ourselves on the breath. The problem is that it's very easy to get worked up and upset. And these days, basically everyone is feeling the anxiety of the continual chaos and turmoil. The zone is proverbially flooded with shit. And we need to get back to our center. We need ourselves to develop equanimity, tranquility, mental stability, emotional quietude. So first, just for a moment, draw your attention to your breath and be aware of the slow and steady inhalations and exhalations. Feel the breath. Know that you are the breath. That breathing is the process of living. And then take a deep inhalation and exhale deeply, getting rid of all the stale air and all of your trouble and torment, your trauma, not just from this year, but from this life and all previous lives before. So welcome all. The Christmas season is here. The new year is quickly approaching. I just wanted to start off by looking back over the year that has passed. And in doing so, the first thing I want to do is to express my gratitude. To express my gratitude to all of you who have worked in your own way, in a big way or in a small way, in order to build this community. And there have been many people. I wanted to say thank you to Mary, for example, because she's worked so hard to help connect people through the Discord, moderating our teachings, being the go-between between me and all the people who have questions, have interest in the Dharma, who want to participate. I wanted to thank Jeanette and Sonia, who were working so hard so that we could develop this website that we started this year. There are so many people. Teresa, Dharma Bum, who's been giving his advice and his vast knowledge on the internet and other matters related to computers, this thing that he's such an expert in. There's Clinton and Amelia, who are now staying at the Hermitage full-time and acting as interim caretakers. We had Oriol from Argentina, the man from the jungle, who came and stayed after the retreat this year, the spring retreat, and helped out, collecting firewood so that the other people who came to the retreat, the Hermitage, would be able to heat themselves, have something to burn. There are so many people who have contributed in small and great ways. Recently, Philip McAdams, he gave us an old generator that he no longer uses. He used to be a builder and he's retired now. And his wife said, "We don't need that thing, get rid of it." And he donated it. And I was really pleased because it's a 6.5 kVA generator. It's just great. It's enough for emergency power for the Hermitage when the wind blows and the power lines come down. There are those who've attended retreats and seeing that to be a good thing, something positive, and also having this altruistic mindset and wishing others to be able to have the same opportunities, then have contributed to the project, given what little cash they have to spare. And I know that's a difficult thing these days. And donating to the Insight Sangha, this society that we established. And for all those people that I forgot, Arthur, he taught yoga at the retreat, for example. The people who cooked and helped serve. My friend Paul, Martin, all the people involved on the Discord and on the channel. So thank you to everyone. But remember that we're doing this together. It's a community. I mean, it's a small community. But in the future, it's possible that we may establish something that will persist, certainly beyond my lifetime, as I'm quite old now, but also perhaps beyond your lifetimes, to help establish a system, an infrastructure that supports those and their sincere desire to follow the spiritual path. And so 2025 was kind of the first time it really felt like things were starting to happen. We established the Insight Sangha. It's a society, not-for-profit organization, an important step, because we need to be able to somehow divert resources towards a goal. And that goal is the development of spiritual insight. And associated with that, then there's the obvious promotion, etc., and this sort of portal by which people can come to know what we're up to, you know, newsletters, websites. That all happened in the beginning of the year. And then we had our very first silent retreat in spring 2025 at the wonderful KDOL location in Salt Spring. And, you know, everybody did really well. They thanked me, but I thanked them. Because they applied themselves. They took it seriously. They knew what they were getting themselves into, and they applied themselves to that. They understood their reasons for wanting to do it. It's not like we had to force anybody. And they appreciated being given the opportunity. And so we all pitched in. And we were meditating in the end. You know, more than 6 hours a day. With yoga, 3 hours of teaching every day. Many of these people were beginners. But many of them kind of got the idea of what it is we're trying to do. Really what you need to do, personally, if you want to make spiritual development. And that requires some hardship and also some sacrifices. For example, simple things like getting rid of your mobile phone, keeping silent. It's not easy all the time, right? These are personal sacrifices. And like I said, then the spring retreat went really well. And then through the summer, we were able to really start in earnest in developing the hermitage. And so now we've got some actual accommodation for people. And then there was the retreat in autumn. Again, we had to rent out an external facility for this. And this one was more focused on locals, but also people who were basically absolute beginners. But everyone did well, those participating online and those participating in person. And for all of us, then we have challenges, financial, in terms of relationships, etc. Life gets in the way of spiritual practice. But seeing it to be important, then people apply themselves. And so that gives me great joy. Because I know what the potential results of this are. And so I express my gratitude to you all. And as I said, then Clinton and Amelia, two people who have previously attended our free retreats, then they've come to live at the Hermitage. I mean, they needed a place to live. They had a change in life. But they're doing their best to contribute, right? At very least, to gather firewood. Because like in a year, 2 years, when somebody else comes, they also need heat. They also need to cook food, etc. I mean, this is the vision from the very beginning, is that this project will be non-transactional. It's not like you attend and then you feel like you owe me something personally, or that you owe the institution something. The idea is that you come to see the importance of authentic spiritual practice and how beneficial that is to oneself and others. And because of seeing that, and you yourself develop this wish to provide that opportunity for others. And so now we have a third volunteer. Laima from Lithuania has come. She met us all through the channel, through YouTube, through the Discord. And she thought, that's a really neat idea. I really would like to participate. And so she came all the way from Lithuania. She's staying all winter. And we've been working hard. We've just been building a road, for example. Do you know what it's like to build a road? In the United States of America, they usually get convicts to do this, shoveling stones and things like that. But if you've got people coming, you need access. And so in spring 2026, we're going to have our first retreat on our own property. And so now we're working very hard to prepare for this. And so overall, it has been a very good year. For the first 2 years after coming here from Nepal, then I've been basically working on my own. I started off by building a sawmill, and it was like 6 months, 1 or 2 days a week, all on my own. But as community builds, as we come together and more people make the connection, then there's the potential there, right? Because the greatest resource in the world is not all oil or gold or rare earths. The greatest resource is the human resource. Without that, we can't achieve anything. And if in the future there's a meditation retreat run by robots, then who's going to be meditating? Anyway, somebody has to develop those robots. Of course, there have also been challenges this year. For example, about midway through the year, then my mother started to die. As you know, I returned from Nepal 3 years ago, just over 3 years ago now. And the purpose was to look after my parents, but especially my mother, who is chronically ill. And then for pretty much the whole of 2025, her situation had just deteriorated. Things had become very difficult. It was very challenging. And at one point, it nearly destroyed me. Eventually, my mother passed, and she had quite a good death. And so now there's a kind of new chapter. My father is quite independent, and so I can spend maybe even 3 days a week at the Hermitage. Currently, we're building our second kind of meditation hut. It's like a platform in the forest. The first one was a tent. It's a wall tent on a platform, big enough to hold 4 people. And now we're building an actual house. So now that it's just me and Dad, I've got more time for that. At some point in the future, obviously, then his situation will get worse and he will need more care. After all, he's 93 years old. But at the moment, he's really good. He's very sharp mentally. And like last week, he played golf 3 times. So he's okay. But at some point, he will need my help. And so this year, having found new friends, having people contribute to the vision has been very heartening for me. Because actually, it's quite difficult going it alone. At one point, I felt like the entire weight of the world was on my shoulders. And that I couldn't carry the burden anymore, especially with my mother's sickness. But then slowly throughout the year, then I found solace and maybe opened myself up to the help of others. Those who have been so gracious with their time, have been so kind. But we have to understand is the spiritual path is something we do for ourselves first. And it's only once we have achieved some level of experience or realization that we are then able to help others. I mean, I try to help others. And I think maybe because of my fortune of having met an authentic spiritual teacher, that I have some ability to help others. And this is primarily around this area of meditation. And although we tend to associate meditation with basic kind of techniques, for example, what we did at the beginning here, watching the breath, etc., that's not essentially what we call meditation. This practice is the practice of stilling or centering, and it's an important preliminary or preparation for actual meditation. The term meditation means to cultivate. And there's kind of two types of cultivation. There's a cultivation towards virtuous actions, habituation towards virtue. But there's also this cultivation which is the removal of our conceptual fallacies, misunderstanding, our assumptions, mistaken assumptions about reality. And this is the true form of meditation. Why is it the true form of meditation or cultivation? And that's because it's that which brings liberation. And liberation isn't about flying off to some heavenly realm. Liberation means to be free from your ignorance, to be free from your identification. But there's so few people who understand this point, or actually what meditation is. I mean, I was initially inspired to release videos on YouTube because when I came back to the West, I was so surprised to see how much disinformation there was online and how bad things had gotten, essentially, in terms of the spiritual path. Initially, it seemed as if people were turning on to meditation and spirituality, and most people had great respect in Buddhism and in Tibetan Buddhism in particular. But with the increased polarization in the world these days, then when I came out of retreat 3 years ago, I was shocked to see how badly people regarded the path in general. But this isn't just about spirituality, it's about everything. Everyone has become totally nihilistic and polarized. And it's as if they no longer have hope for anything positive in the world. This is mistaken. Because as long as there is life, as long as there is consciousness, then there is the potential for virtuous actions. And if you believe in Buddhism, then you believe that everything arises from causality. If you set down the correct causes and conditions, then the results will be positive. However, if you set down the incorrect causes and conditions, then you will experience increasing suffering. And that's what we're doing to ourselves at the moment. That's where we are. But people can't see this. For example, the trolls in the comment section. They probably think it's kind of entertaining, or they're doing something that's fun, or they're doing something positive in some way, correcting the way of thinking of other beings. But they're only creating their own future suffering. And so this comes to some of the challenges of this year. And one thing that has been happening is that there's been a lot of stuff being posted online that is criticizing especially teachers within the Tibetan Buddhism associated with Samyeling and Triangle Monastery. For example, my own teacher. And it's very sad to see this. The primary reason why this is sad is because the individuals who are engaged in this activity are essentially causing themselves great harm in the future. They're laying down the causes for their own suffering. But we don't see this. It's the same way in geopolitics in the world at the moment. It's the same thing. For example, most people think, if you're on the left or the right, that if you can own the other side, make them look stupid, then somehow you've won. But this only contributes to the polarization. But especially if you make baseless accusations against what we call significant individuals. And these are primarily spiritual teachers who benefit people in a large extent. Then the negativity from this is extreme. Because in doing so, you stop others from gaining the benefit of the path. But as I've said a million times before, you have to be critical, and you have to go into things with your eyes wide open. Don't fall under the spell of blind faith and self-delusion, essentially. But I find it surprising because, in general, the criticism that you hear these days, to me, doesn't make sense. I'm going to have to explain that because you need to see things in worldly terms in order to understand it. As I said before, when it comes to the spiritual path, then everything we normally deem as sensible gets thrown out the window. For example, in general, most Westerners are quite critical in the way they think. Like there's been this shift away from religion in the last few hundred years. We've seen science to have proven things that were previously explained away by the God of the Gaps, etc., with supernatural explanations that now can be clearly explained through science. This has caused us to be more critical. I mean, we have turned against this slightly recently. Many people are sort of anti-science and anti-medicine, etc. But in general, we're quite critical thinkers, and we don't like the idea of faith, especially blind faith. We don't like dogma. But somehow when we come to religion, we lose all of that. And so we kind of get ourselves into something that we don't really know what we're getting ourselves into. Part of that is a big mistake that people make, is that when they come to the spiritual path, they come to it with kind of selfish intent. For example, they find it pleasurable. Now, that's not a bad thing. The Buddha said that meditation should be pleasurable in the beginning, the middle, and the end. And so when somebody comes to like their first yoga retreat or to a meditation retreat, for the first time they sit down all day long and they meditate, and then they feel kind of benefits from that. I mean, their knees might hurt, but there's this kind of mental quietude, right? The kind of mental quietude that kind of online trolls don't have. Their mind is always kind of disturbed by negativity. And then we go into this sort of retreat environment. Maybe it's a 10-day Vipassana retreat. We have to put our phone aside, right? We're told you're not allowed to use your phone. You're not allowed to speak. Close your eyes when you meditate, etc., etc. Listen to these teachings. Meditate X amount of hours a day. It's a hardship. But when we do that, then we experience this mental quietude. And that's pleasurable. So it's not surprising that people enter into the path for pleasurable reasons. But when I look at some of the criticisms that's being leveled at, for example, Drupal Rinpoche, my teacher, then I'm completely surprised. I'm completely shocked by it. Because, well, the way I relate it is, for example, there's some sports in the world that are extremely risky and dangerous, right? For example, there's a sport called base jumping. Has anybody heard of base jumping? Well, base jumping is essentially where you run off a cliff and you jump off a cliff with a parachute. And then at some point, at the exact moment, you have to release the parachute, and then you get taken away safely, hopefully, but it's very dangerous. And even more dangerous than that is something called wingsuit base jumping. I don't know if you know what a wingsuit is, but basically you wear this kind of tracksuit that's like a kite. So under your arms, you've got fabric, and between your legs, you've got fabric. And then you jump off a cliff and you try to fly like Batman. And of course, it's like the most extreme and exhilarating kind of sport you can do. Of extreme sports, it's probably the most exhilarating. You see these amazing shots of people like flying like birds over atolls in the Indian Ocean, etc. It just looks amazing. But it's extremely risky and dangerous. So why am I saying this analogy? Okay, so in terms of the spiritual path, let's say you've got a friend. And he comes up to you and you said, "Oh, did you hear about John?" No, what happened to John? "Oh, John died." And they said, "What? How did he die? I just saw him last week, he was fine." "Well, he thought he'd try this new sport." And he didn't realize what he was getting himself into. And then he died. Well, what was he doing? Oh, he was base jumping. And then, well, why on earth was he base jumping? Well, he didn't check it out. He just thought he'd do it and give it a try. And then he died. And you'd be like, well, of course he died. That's stupid, right? We'd never do that. For example, even just doing controlled parachute jumping, you'd be really, really cautious about that. Because you'd know something about it. And it's like that. For something like a really extreme sport like base jumping, or wingsuit jumping out of an airplane with no parachute, you'd think twice. You wouldn't go into it not knowing what you were doing. You don't just generally think, well, I want to do kind of sport, it doesn't matter which one it is, and then just randomly pick a sport, right? Unless you're crazy. So we would never, we'd think, of course he was going to die. That's just a stupid thing to do. And so why do I say that? Because that's basically what people do on the spiritual path. For example, recently, well, not that recently, I did a 4-year retreat at Sami Ling. This is on the island of Arran. And simultaneously, then there was a women's retreat. So the men went to one retreat, the women went to another, and we did a 4-year retreat. And it was with my teacher, Drupal Rinpoche. And before we went into retreat, we spent months preparing at Sami Ling, having teachers. And not only that, most of the students who attended, pretty well all of them, maybe I was the one who had least experience in this, had received teachings from Drupal Rinpoche before. And he was basically very clear about exactly what we were doing. And he's very strict. And he doesn't hide that fact. He doesn't try to make himself look like a kind of little saint or something like that. You know, he doesn't try to pretend he's a bodhisattva. He's really, really tough. And all of the people who attended the retreat knew this. And we spent months preparing for the retreat, getting up early in the morning, studying and practicing all day long for months and months and months. So it'd be like no surprise. And not only that, all of these people were self-avowed Tibetan Buddhists. And so they spent years studying scriptures. For example, the stories of Milarepa. Milarepa who relied on Marpalot Sawa. And everywhere in the teachings, in the scriptures, in the life stories, it goes on and on and on about what a difficult path this is. The kind of sacrifices you need to make. And what the goal is. The goal of Vajrayana Buddhism is to find final emancipation from samsara in one lifetime, and therefore it's an extreme path. That's how it's advertised on the box. And then, if you spend years studying that, and then you know this teacher, and he makes it very clear what he expects of you, and then you go into retreat, and then you complain because it's too tough, to me that is just mind-boggling. That's just like somebody deciding they're going to start base jumping, and then they complain because it's dangerous. You know, after knowing full well that it's the most dangerous sport in the world. But like I said before, this is what we do on the spiritual path. There's a reason why we do extreme things in Tibetan Buddhism. You've probably heard of the 6 yogas and the practice of Tummo. For example, the practice of Tummo, you basically sit in your underpants, and an ideal situation, you'll be sitting out in the snow, sitting on the snow, in the snow, and they wrap your body in a wet blanket. So if I said to you, okay, we're going to spend 3 years doing Tummo, we're going to sit out on a mountaintop, and then you're going to have to take your clothes off, and I'm going to wrap a wet blanket around you in -10 weather, and you're like, yeah, I'm up for that. That sounds great. And then we go out on the mountaintop, and I do everything we said we're going to do, and then you turn around and say, why are you abusing me? That's kind of strange, isn't it? Really what happens is people think they're up for it. They hear about the high practices. They get kind of mesmerized by the stories of the masters of the past, realizing the Dzogchen, the Mao Mudra, and all this kind of high terminology, stories of dakinis flying in the sky, you know, meditating monks in Himalayan monasteries in the mountains, and they become mesmerized by this. And then when they come and try to do the practices and they find they're not able to, they can't accept the fact that they weren't up to it. And so they look to blame someone else. I mean, I was in retreat with someone who begged to go into retreat. Not only that, he didn't have a lot of money, but he got an inheritance from his aunt, I believe, for like thousands of dollars, thousands of pounds. And he spent all of that money in order to get a place in retreat because he was so keen, and he felt like he was going to like be the best retreat in the whole world. And then in the first week, he was acting as if somebody had forced him to be there. I mean, you pay money to go there. You give up your life, you give up your job, give up your girlfriend, as I did in my case, knowing full well that you're going to be expected to spend 4 years meditating. I mean, we don't even sleep in beds. Nobody hid that fact from me. You know you've got to get up at 3 in the morning. That if you're lazy, you have to meditate 8 hours a day. If you're doing the bare minimum, you're going to meditate 12 hours a day. And there's no holidays. You're totally aware of this. And then you pay for it. And then you turn around and like in the first week, like this guy, and just complain as if somebody's forcing you to do it. It's just complete madness. You should not be in any illusion about this. And so why am I saying this? Well, it's to point out this important consideration. And if you read Words of My Perfect Teacher, right at the beginning, Patrul Rinpoche states, the first thing you need to do is to check out your teacher. You have to know who you're going to rely on before you rely on that person. And the teacher has to check out the students. I do this in my retreats. When we do retreats, I vet everybody on Zoom. I have to speak to them one-to-one. Because I know how important the participants are. And so if somebody maybe is going in for the wrong reasons, or you think that it's going to be too tough for them, then I'd rather they didn't join. And so far this has worked out well, because we've had 2 really successful retreats. The second one I was a little bit less careful, because I wanted to open it up more to beginners. But luckily things didn't go wrong. I should have been a bit more strict. So the student has to check out the teacher. You have to know who the teacher is, what their methods are, what they're going to expect of you. And then on top of that, then the teacher needs to check you out. There needs to be a relationship there. You don't go into these things willy-nilly, just like you're not going to go into parachuting or base jumping or, you know, sort of this free riding where you go down the side of a mountain on a mountain bike. These aren't for beginners. Retreat is not for a beginner. A retreat isn't like where you go and get massages. That's what most people thought, actually. When I went into retreat, most of the Westerners in Canada had no idea what I was talking about. They thought I was going to have a holiday for 4 years. You're going on retreat for 4 years? It's like, won't you get tired of like jacuzzis and therapy? But at least, I mean, I guess occasionally somebody who's totally new to Tibetan Buddhism will want to join a retreat. But certainly in Sami Ling, then they discourage you. I applied. I'd been studying in Sami Ling for several years, and I applied for the retreat. And the first thing they said was, well, we don't have a space. Maybe you should think about it. They don't encourage you to do this because they know how difficult it is. And then we spent 2 months with the retreat master preparing. And he doesn't hide the fact that he's strict. But the truth of the matter is that most of the people, for the most part, as far as I can tell, who are attacking his methodologies, or attacking Tibetan Buddhism in general, are doing so for spurious reasons. For example, there's this woman I spoke about in a recent video, and she's fallen under spiritual delusion. She thinks she's a dakini, right? Thinking you are a dakini is an indication you don't understand what a dakini is to start off with. But she thinks she's somebody special, with special insight, and power. But what's happened is that she's developed resentment. She's on a vendetta. And so she's been going around trying to collect negative stories that she might be able to associate with Samueling and Drupal Rinpoche and anybody associated with Taringa Monastery. I mean, some of the names that she's been spouting in her rants are just, to me, just totally unconscionable that these people could do anything wrong. For example, there's Lama Dawa Purba, that she's mentioned in some negative context. I know this man really well. I was in retreat for years with this guy. He's the most humble and meekest person I've ever met. He's got a really senior role in the monastery. He's the lead chant master, and he's so humble and so kind. He used to teach us Tibetan, and his Tibetan's really good, by the way. All the Tibetans say, because he's Nepali, he's not Tibetan. I mean, his lineage is like Tibetan blood, but his family don't speak Tibetan. But he speaks really good Tibetan, and the people from Lhasa, who have got really high level of Tibetan, say, wow, your Tibetan's really good. So he was teaching us colloquial Tibetan, and some of the Chinese students would criticize him, saying he'd done things wrong, suggesting he'd done things wrong, because the Tibetan language doesn't follow the grammar. It's kind of colloquial, right? It's a bit wayward, but everything he says is perfect in terms of conversational Tibetan. But they would criticize him or laugh at him. He'd never get upset. He'd be like, oh, so sorry, did I do it wrong? He's that kind of person. And then there's this Geshe Sering. He's like one of our teachers. He's a scholar. A humble old man. So learned, so kind, no pride. But through association, and these people who have developed resentment for their own failings, then they lash out. And it's just what's happening in the world right now with geopolitics, right? We just can't cope with somebody else having a different opinion than us. And we can't cope with not being exceptional or special in some way. And so this is the case with this woman who thinks she's a Dakini. What had happened was she'd often in the past caused trouble, but as far as I know, then she attended a big conference in Bhutan of scholars, and there were venerable monks from Sri Lanka, the bare shoulder, yellow robes, old venerable monks, Tibetans, Bhutanese, dignitaries, all show up to this big conference. And she got up on the stage and started playing some kind of rave music. And she started saying, come on, everybody, get up and dance. Why are you so stiff? Or something like that. And they were all kind of shocked, right? Especially these old venerable monks from Sri Lanka who aren't even allowed to smile, almost. And so she embarrassed herself publicly. And then, because they didn't publish her paper, which was, there's probably a lot of good reasons why they didn't, but primarily they just thought she was insane, right? She embarrassed herself publicly. Then she went on this vendetta. And we have something called the Marpa Translation Society. And the Marpa Translation Society is a beneficent society that translates texts and provides the books for free. And those of you who have received this preliminaries book, I've sent to a few people, Torch for the Definitive Meaning, it's such a good quality publication. It's the most wonderful book ever. And it's translated really well. And it's all provided for free. And everybody volunteers their services for free. And most of the translators have been in retreat for like 10, 20 years, studying the language, meditating. Really good group of people. Really dedicated to what they're doing and doing it for the right reasons. And so she applied to the society. And my teacher has got one rule. Really, well, he's got quite a few rules, but this is a really important rule. And that is, if somebody's like a troublemaker, then he doesn't want them to get involved because he knows what kind of trouble comes with somebody like that. Especially if somebody's a little bit unhinged or they've got spiritual delusion like this woman does. But he just said, oh, no, thank you. We have enough translators. And that just made her so angry, right? She thought she'd been scorned. And so since then, she's trying to smear Drupal Ken Rinpoche, my teacher. And part of the reason why she's smearing him is saying that he's tough. He is tough. He's a super tough teacher. And I knew that from the very moment I started receiving teachings from him. I was under no delusion, and nobody would be, because he doesn't hide the fact. And the point is, he is tough for our sake, because we are lazy. We are full of negative emotions, jealousy, pride, anger, desire. Currently, he is personally supporting 280 students at the retreat center in Nepal. This group has just grown and grown throughout the years. I went there 11 years ago. There was a small group of Westerners, a handful of Chinese. We used to sit in the dining room, about 20 or 30 of us, maybe less, receiving teachings, meditating. And since then, it's just grown and grown and grown. And there's like a 1 or 2 year waiting list to get in there. Why? Because everyone is desperate to receive teachings from this guy. And he finds all the money. He supports everyone there. Their food, there's no charge to be there. He works tirelessly day and night, barely sleeps. And because he was born as a nomad in eastern Tibet, and as many people like this born into very poor environments, then he's got hepatitis C, really advanced. So the thing he should do is, the doctor says, just rest, eat well, sleep well, and he just never stops. And why? Because if he sees somebody who's sincere on the path, he will do anything for them to give them the causes, conditions, and opportunities to practice and to get an education. And there is no better education for Westerners anywhere in the world, 100%. I challenge anybody to show me a better opportunity that's going on now for your spiritual development in the West. In Tibetan Buddhism, let's say, because I'm not that familiar. And I think there's actually quite a few good opportunities in Theravadan Buddhism, but I doubt that you will get that far in those environments. There's various issues, but 100% in terms of Tibetan Buddhism, and I would suspect in terms of Buddhism in general, then there's no better opportunity. And it's free, if you're sincere. But as I said, most people who have got a grievance, it's not because they find fault in another, it's because of their own faults in this regard. And mainly it's because of their own failures. Especially us Westerners, we want to be exceptional. We want to be somebody special. Half the Western practitioners are just trying to figure out which tuku they are. I mean, of course, there are very good Western practitioners. You don't hear a lot from them. They don't make a noise and they don't make a fuss. The best of them are in retreat. I mean, Samuel's here. He's attended every single retreat. He's another Baltic hero, superhero. He's from Estonia. He's attended every retreat we've done online, up in the middle of the night because of the time zone difference. And, you know, he does home retreat all the time. There's lots of people like that. They don't make a fuss. They don't make a noise. And when they have opportunities, they grasp those opportunities with both hands. And they have gratitude. Oh, thank you so much. And the worst of them, they'll do a 6-month retreat and they think they're going to be like Milarepa. They fail miserably. They can't cope with the idea that they haven't been able to become somebody special because it's just an ego trip. And that's the problem with many people going to retreat. They do it out, especially for men, they do it out of ego. It's like joining the Marines or something like that. And then when they can't be exceptional, and when they realize they have work to do, and then they look for an excuse, blame somebody else for why they've failed. It can't be my fault, it must be their fault. And this is when somebody is, for example, providing you with everything, the opportunities. So, anyway, that's how things are going. Don't fall into this trap yourself. If you're a good spiritual practitioner, then you will be humble and quiet, and you'll primarily spend a lot of time in your own practice. And you won't worry about being famous or being somebody special. This is a big problem in the West because most of our teachers are people who have gone down this path. There's kind of not many different routes you can go if you think you're special or if you want to really go for it. Many people will try to pretend they're like a great yogi, go off to the cave, and then they'll make themselves sick. And then they say, well, the Dharma damaged me, so I can't practice anymore. Or they'll think, this is nonsense, this doesn't work. It's a load of bullshit. Because I failed, so therefore it doesn't work. It didn't do anything for me. But then the worst of them just can't cope with the idea that they haven't accomplished anything. And so they make up this story, this narrative that they're an enlightened being, a dakini, somebody special. And they spend all of their time looking down on others. If your path goes well, initially what will happen is you'll realize how much more work you have to do. And you'll also realize that you're basically an ordinary being and a long way from your goal. But if you have faith in karma, cause and effect in past and future lives, that doesn't matter. Because the point is, we've been going around in circles for countless lifetimes. And all of our previous strategies up until now haven't worked. And in order for that to happen, especially on this path, what we need to do is find an authentic teacher. And having found an authentic teacher, and that's something that requires research, it's not just picking any old Tibetan Lama that you meet. Having found who you deem to be an authentic teacher, then you have to do your best to apply yourself in any way you can. Practice with vigor, as if your head was on fire. As my own teacher Akon Rinpoche had said, until final awakening, or at least until you gain some realization, don't rest for 1 minute. Don't waste a single day. Apply yourself to your practice. So till next time. See you later.